Was a 10-second dare really worth destroying everything we had built together? I told myself the kiss was harmless. Just a joke, just a moment, just proof that I was fun and brave, and not the boring wife everyone assumed I had become. But when the video reached my husband before I even got home that night, I started to understand how a single choice in front of a crowd can cost you every quiet room that ever mattered. My name is Calixta Drum. I am 31 years old, and I work as a marketing coordinator at Greyfield Solutions, a mid-size logistics firm in the city centre. I am good at my job in the way that people who are quick with language and quick to read a room tend to be. I produce ideas fast, I pitch well, and I am the person the department relies on when energy needs lifting. I have been married to Warren for 4 years. He is a civil engineer on the infrastructure division floor, 2 floors below mine, and we met at Greyfield, which people find either romantic or concerning depending on how long they have known us. I used to find it charming. Lately I find it crowded. On a Tuesday morning 3 weeks before the annual company social, I was on the bench in the gym anteroom near my building, fluorescent light overhead, a long row of yellow-tagged lockers, the air damp the way gym air always is early. I had not started my workout. I was reading a message from Derek Sloan, a sales representative on my floor who had been sending things that made me feel alert in a way I had not felt in a while. I typed something back I thought was clever and did not think about Warren while I was typing, and I told myself that was fine. The bent clip on my work lanyard caught the light from the high window. I put my bag on the floor and told myself to go and exercise. That evening, Warren was in the armchair across from me while I sat with my laptop on the sofa, the side lamp on, Rosie already in bed. He asked how my day had gone and I gave him the short version. He was quiet for a moment and then asked whether everything between us was all right, because lately, he said, I seemed to be somewhere else even when I was in the same room. He mentioned one specific Saturday 3 weeks back when I came home 2 hours later than my usual gym session. He said he was not accusing me of anything. He simply wanted to know if I was happy. I closed my laptop a fraction and told him I was tired, and that asking a tired person if they are happy was a way of making them feel like a problem. He said he was not looking for a complaint, he was looking for a conversation, and he asked one more time whether there was something I wanted to tell him. I said no. He picked up the television remote and turned it on, and neither of us spoke again, and the lamp made his face patient and half-lit, and I did not look at it for long. The company social was 2 weeks away when things on my floor started settling into a shape I liked. Derek stopped by my desk with a cross-department document that required about 30 seconds of my attention, and stayed for 7 minutes, sitting on the edge of the empty desk adjacent to mine, and talking in the particular quiet way that means the conversation is not meant to carry. He told me that the social had a games section built in, Dares, a committee-planned betting game, and that he had already confirmed his own dare, though he would not say what it was. He said there was a song he had requested the DJ to keep on standby. I told him, before I had fully thought it through, that I had a dare too, and that I was good at them. I meant it as a statement about myself. Nadia Poe, who sits near the printer island and was loading paper at that moment, was close enough to hear all of it, though she gave no sign that she was listening. The campaign milestone came 2 days before the social and the marketing team went to the rooftop bar 3 blocks from the office to celebrate. There were 7 of us, and Derek came because he was passing through the floor when the plan was forming, and someone said to bring him along, which is how Derek tends to end up places. The bar was full for a Thursday. The south-facing table we got had a clean line of sight across to the Greyfield Tower, and I could see the 6th-floor windows still lit yellow in the early evening. Warren's department, infrastructure, working late as usual. I did not look at those windows for long either. At 7:20, my phone rang, and the display showed Warren's name. I was in the middle of a story about a client presentation, and I pressed the side button to send the call to voicemail without breaking eye contact with the group, the way you dismiss a notification you have already decided is not urgent. The phone rang again at 7:30. I sent it to voicemail a second time and ordered another round. Nadia, across the table, asked if everything was okay. I said, Warren worried. I said it with a small, fond smile, the way you describe a pet's quirk. And she looked at me for a beat longer than the answer required before someone else started talking. The next morning, Warren was making Rosie's lunchbox at the kitchen counter when I came in with my coffee mug. Rosie was at the breakfast nook with her toast. He said he had called twice the previous evening. I said I had been in a loud place and missed them. He said both calls had gone to voicemail within 2 rings and that a missed call and a declined call behaved differently, and he had noticed the difference. He was not raising his voice. He said these were the 4th and 5th declined calls in 3 weeks, and he was asking me, directly, to explain one thing. Why answering his call in front of work colleagues at a bar table where everyone else had partners would have been awkward, because he was genuinely trying to think of a reason and could not find one. Rosie looked up from her toast. I put my mug on the counter with a controlled tap and said he was turning a bar trip with work friends into a court case, and that a man who reads voicemail timestamps at the kitchen table had perhaps found his real hobby. He zipped the lunchbox without responding to that. He said he would let it go while Rosie was there but wanted to finish the conversation in the evening. I said there was nothing to finish. He pressed a kiss to Rosie's head and left. He came to my desk that afternoon at 4:15 when most of the floor had gone quiet. He brought me a takeaway coffee in my usual order, which he had memorized in the first month we were together and had never stopped getting right, and he placed it on my desk corner without ceremony. He pulled the chair from the empty adjacent desk, the same one Derek had been sitting on 3 days earlier, and said quietly that he was not there to argue. He said he wanted one honest conversation that evening, after Rosie was in bed, with no phones and no television, because he had been feeling, since around the time of the car insurance renewal, that I was not fully present even when I was physically in the room. He said if she felt the marriage had stalled, they could look at options together, scheduling real time, seeing a counsellor if she preferred. But he could not help with something she would not show him. He asked me directly whether there was a specific person in the building who made me feel I would rather be at work than at home, and he said he was not asking out of jealousy, but out of the need to know what he was actually working with, because the silence was harder to live with than the honest answer. I looked at the coffee cup. I picked it up. I said the question itself was the reason I no longer came home energized, because a woman with a social life got investigated rather than celebrated, and that a counsellor was for people with actual problems rather than for a man who had turned missed calls into evidence of treason. He stood. He said the company's social was the following week, and he was looking forward to going together, and he hoped it would go well. He left the cup and walked back toward the stairwell, and I watched him go and told myself he was being dramatic. That night I called Petra and described Warren as monitoring my schedule and making everything feel like a deposition. She laughed and said it sounded like he was threatened. I said probably. I said there was someone at work who found me interesting without treating that interest as a security breach, and Petra asked about him and I told her it was nothing, just someone who paid attention in a way that felt easy. On the shelf across from the sofa, in the framed photo from the park, Rosie was in her yellow raincoat, and Warren and I were on either side of her, and all 3 of us were wet from an unexpected shower. And the photo had been on that shelf since the week after it was taken, and I had not looked at it in a long time. The Fenchurch suite was dressed for the annual social with low pendant lighting, a long bar, small tables with tea light centerpieces, a stage area, and a coat check counter in the entrance alcove. Warren and I arrived together at 7:45. He brought us both drinks and handed mine over without ceremony, and before I could stop myself I noticed he had worn the charcoal shirt I had chosen for our last proper dinner out. He said I looked good tonight. I thanked him the way you thank a stranger for holding a door. We separated within 12 minutes. The dare game started at 8:30. The first 4 dares were exactly what they should be at a work social. A song, an accent challenge, nothing memorable. When Derek was called up, he drew a slip that said to kiss the most daring person in the room. He looked at me with the expression of someone who wrote the question themselves. The marketing cluster cheered. My table looked at me. I had had 2 drinks and I was wearing the green dress and there were 80-odd people in the room, and I did not turn to look toward the infrastructure cluster where Warren was standing 30 feet away. I walked forward and kissed Derek in front of the crowd for approximately 10 seconds, and the room produced the sound it produces when people decide they are watching the highlight of their evening. I gave a small bow. The applause was real. What I did not know was that Nadia had her phone out. She was filming the stage backdrop for a design reference, wide-angle mode, and the frame caught the stage, and the crowd, and the curved bar, and the far edge of the room. It caught me walking forward. It caught the kiss. And at the right edge of the frame, slightly soft but present, it caught Warren's face in the moment the room cheered. His expression was not an explosion. It was the expression of a man receiving information he had spent several weeks half preparing for, and it was worse to look at than anger would have been. Nadia stopped recording, looked up at the room, put her phone in her bag, and said nothing. At 9:15, a colleague Warren knew from the adjacent division sent him the Instagram reshare. A second clip, shot from the side by someone closer to the stage, already circulating with a caption about dares. Warren read it once, looked at his phone for a measured count of seconds, and put it in his jacket pocket. He appeared at my table at 9:40 and leaned down and said, quietly, that he would like 5 minutes outside, not a scene, just a private word. I looked at my colleagues and let a small eye roll travel between us before I stood. We went through the fire door at the side of the hall into the connecting corridor, strip lighting, grey rubber floor mat, and through the cinder block wall the low, physical thump of the party bass still running on the other side. He showed me the Instagram clip on his phone. I said it was a dare game. He said he knew. He had been in the room and watched it happen. He asked whether at any point during the game I had considered that my husband was standing 30 feet behind me. I said the game was not about him. He said that was exactly the point. He asked me, without raising his voice, why I had chosen the specific colleague I had been having hushed coffee machine conversations with for a month as the target for a kiss I had not mentioned to him in advance. He said he knew about the coffee machine because Nadia had mentioned it to a mutual colleague, and that colleague had told him, not as gossip, but as concern, and that he was asking me to look at the pattern as a whole. The declined calls, the rooftop bar, the coffee machine, the kiss. He asked me to explain any part of it that had a normal explanation because he was open to hearing one. I told him Nadia should stay in her lane and that his network of worried colleagues was its own kind of surveillance. He said he had asked her a single question after being shown a video of his wife kissing a coworker, and he thought that was a reasonable thing to have done. He asked again. I pushed the fire door open. The bass swelled and dropped as the door swung. I said I was going back to the social because it was still running, and if he wanted to come and be normal, he was welcome, and if he wanted to turn a dare game into a breakdown, he could go home and I would sort Rosie's logistics in the morning. He came back inside after a few minutes. He went to the bar and stood at the far end with a water. At 5 to 10, I came to him because I wanted the room to see that everything was fine. He said he had one more thing, and he said it in the way that meant it was not a request. He said what had happened tonight was a line, and he was telling her clearly in a place where she could hear him without an audience pressing in on both sides. He said he was not going to treat her increasing distance as something that would eventually correct itself, and that he intended to handle what was happening between them properly. The word landed differently from anything he had said before. Not a threat, not a speech, just the register of something that had already been decided. He picked his jacket from the coat rail near the entrance alcove and walked out through the lobby doors without looking back. I went to my table and told my colleagues he had a migraine. They believed me immediately. I picked up my drink and held it with both hands and kept my eyes on the lobby door for longer than I needed to. Nadia, at her kitchen table later that night, watched the clip twice, then saved it to a date-labeled folder in her cloud drive, the way she saved every design asset with a version number and a timestamp, and did nothing else with it, and did not delete it either. I got home at 11:30 to a dark living room and a closed guest room door, and through the gap at the bottom a thin line of light. The Saturday morning after the party, I made Rosie's breakfast, and then, while she ate her cereal at the Nook, I opened the marketing in a group chat and sent a message to the 5 people I trusted most on the floor. I said I had heard some people found the dare game intense, and that for what it was worth the kiss had been completely staged, and everyone was in on it. I sent it at 8:47 in the morning before I had fully considered what I was doing. All 5 read it within the hour. One of them forwarded it to 2 other colleagues with a brief comment, something about Derek not being in on the staging, and by Saturday afternoon, that forwarded thread had reached 8 people, one of whom was in the same cluster as Nadia. Nadia read the word staged and thought about her 47-second clip where nothing looked staged, and read the timestamp and said nothing to anyone. I had told my version to enough people that a formal contradiction was now possible, and I had done it before noon on a Saturday from my kitchen while my 4-year-old ate cereal 6 feet away. Warren collected Rosie from nursery on Monday alone. He had updated the authorised contacts list that morning, and when Calixta arrived at the car park at the usual time, she found B, the nursery assistant, looking slightly apologetic, and the list showing only one name for the day. He took Rosie to the small park adjacent to the nursery, and she asked, the way 4-year-olds ask things with no protective distance, why Daddy was sleeping in the other room. He crouched to her level and said grown-ups sometimes needed a room to think in, and that everything was all right. She said she preferred it when they were both in the big room. He said him too. That evening he drove to Joanna's with Rosie asleep in the back seat and sat at Joanna's kitchen table, warm roasting vegetables on the stove, a pot of tea, Rosie in the spare room, and told his sister what had happened in the order it had happened. The party, the dare, the kiss, the Instagram clip, the fire corridor, the Saturday morning message calling it staged. He did not cry. He asked Joanna whether he was reading the situation wrong. She said no without hesitation. She said she had noticed at the last family Sunday that when Warren spoke, I looked at my phone under the table, and she had said nothing at the time because she was not certain. But she was certain now. She said she was on his side and available for anything Rosie needed. Otto, at the dining table with his crossword, looked up once and told Warren, without drama and without looking away from the page, that the man who keeps his patience is the last one standing, then went back to his puzzle. I met Warren at the kitchen table on Wednesday evening. Rosie was at Joanna's for the night, which he had arranged, genuinely, to give us room. He had made dinner. He sat with his hands folded and said he wanted to understand where they went from here, because the guest room was not permanent, and he did not want Rosie growing up inside a silence neither of them was willing to name. He asked his trap question. He wanted to know, now that the party was behind them, whether I regarded what had happened in the Fenchurch suite as something I would do again, because his next steps depended on my honest answer to that specific question. He said this was not a threat. It was a matter of planning. I changed tactic. I let the sharpness drop out of my voice entirely and said, in a tone I made deliberately soft, that I was sorry the party had upset him. I said I was aware the fire corridor conversation had not been my best moment, and that I would like us to return to a normal routine. Rosie in her room, the 2 of us in the bedroom, and I suggested 1 week of ordinary life before any decisions were made. I touched his hand briefly on the table. I framed it as generosity, as the mature offer from the adult who had taken the temperature of the situation and was now doing the responsible thing. He listened. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, gently and without the warmth returning to his face, whether I was sorry for what had happened or sorry that it had upset him, and whether I could make that distinction clearly, because the 2 things required different responses from him. I pulled my hand back. I said he was converting my apology into a logic exercise. He said he was asking whether I believed the kiss itself had been wrong or only his reaction to it. I did not answer. He waited for a full count of seconds. I told him I had tried and pushed back from the table. He said he noticed. He took his dishes to the sink and washed them while I went to the living room, and neither of us spoke again that evening, and what I had calculated as a gracious peace offering had produced instead a documented answer to the question he had actually been asking. The next morning before work, he stood in the bedroom doorway while I dressed and said he had one more thing. He said he had spoken to Joanna. Not details, only the general situation. And she was available for Rosie pickups while things were unresolved, which he had arranged so I would not need to manage the logistics. He said he would not attend social events together until they had had an honest conversation, because performing normality in public while the private situation was what it was had become something he was not able to do. He asked his trap question. He wanted me to name one person I had spoken to honestly about what was actually happening in our marriage, because he was willing to sit down with that person alongside me if it would help. I said the question assumed I was hiding something. He said that was a reasonable reading of the available evidence. I took my jacket from the wardrobe hook and left. My mother called that evening. She had been sympathetic all week, the way she is always sympathetic first and curious second. But at the end of the call, she said one thing differently. She said she had met Warren at Christmas and he had struck her as a man who paid attention, and that in her experience, the ones who pay attention eventually find things. She said it as an observation, not a warning. I told her I would call her back and put the phone on my desk and did not call her back. Walking back from the bathroom at the end of that day, I passed the interior glass window above the infrastructure floor stairwell and looked down at Warren's desk. The lamp was on. A dark green binder I had not seen before sat on his shelf. His screen showed columns I did not recognize before the angle of the stairs took me past the window. 3 weeks after the party, I was at my desk when I saw Warren cross the marketing floor toward the glass-walled HR room on the 4th floor. I watched him knock, saw Ellen Marsh open the door in her grey blazer, and saw the door close behind him. The meeting lasted 31 minutes. I clocked it. When he came out, he walked back to the infrastructure stairwell without looking toward my floor. I opened a message to Derek and then closed it. I opened a message to Petra instead. 2 days later, I was at the pharmacy 2 blocks from the office on my lunch break, collecting Rosie's antihistamines. 3 people were ahead of me. The second person was Warren. He had not seen me. He was looking at his phone, and then, not checking a message, not reading anything, he opened what looked like a banking application, scrolled once, and with 2 quiet taps he cancelled something, pocketed the phone, and moved forward as the queue shortened. He did it the way you do something you decided to do before you arrived, without any weight to the action, without any expression. I almost said his name. When he reached the counter, collected a small package, and turned to leave, he saw me. He said hello. I said hello. He said he had not known I was coming here. I said I was getting Rosie's antihistamines. He nodded, said he would see me at home, and walked out. At the counter, I could not immediately find the prescription reference number and had to look it up on my phone with 2 people behind me waiting. That evening was the balcony. Rosie was asleep. The air was warm enough to be outside. He was at the railing when I came home, looking at the street below without his phone. I stood beside him and we were both quiet for a minute. He said, without turning to look at me, still facing down toward the street, that this was the last time he would bring this up in this way. He said he had tried to have this conversation honestly and without drama on several occasions, and each time I had made a choice that moved the door further from open. He was not going to keep pushing it from his side. He said what he wanted, right now, in this specific conversation, was for me to tell him what I actually wanted. From him, from the marriage, from my life right now. And he would listen without interruption, and the offer was genuine and had no condition attached. He said, if I wanted to rebuild what had broken, he would like to hear that. He said if I wanted something different, he would rather hear it from me than learn it some other way. His trap question. He asked me to name one thing I had done in the past month specifically for the marriage. Not for myself, not for work, not for how I looked to other people, but for the marriage. Because he could not think of one, and he genuinely wanted to be wrong about that. He looked at me then and waited. I looked at the street below. I told him it was extraordinary that a man could spend a month in the guest room calling himself the injured party and then appear on the balcony positioning himself as the one offering generosity. I said I knew about the HR meeting and I knew about the green binder, and I was not going to perform in a proceeding I had not signed up to enter. My voice was flat and controlled. He said nothing for a long time. One car passed on the street below. He said, in the register of something decided rather than felt, that he would handle what needed to be handled properly. He went inside. The balcony door made a small, clean sound as it closed. Not a slam, just a sound of completion. And I stayed outside, alone. The next afternoon, I checked the joint account app during a meeting and found a transfer from the day before to an account I did not recognize. I told myself it was a bill I had forgotten. At lunch, I walked past the bank branch near the office and saw Warren at a teller window through the plate glass. I did not go in. I bought a sandwich and went back to my desk. At the end of that week, I passed Warren's desk on the infrastructure floor on my way to a cross-department meeting and saw it from the corridor. It was clear in the way that a desk that has been actively worked through becomes clear, not abandoned, but finished with. The dark green binder was on the shelf beside a second, thinner one in dark blue. Both had typed labels I could not read from where I stood. His laptop screensaver was cycling. 1 cup of water on the desk. His colleague adjacent glanced at me when I looked for too long, and I moved my eyes back to my agenda. That evening, a building management notification arrived on my phone. A locksmith appointment for apartment 14B, our apartment, on the following Thursday between 8 and 10 in the morning, reference GF-221. I messaged Warren to ask what the locksmith was for. He replied after 11 minutes with one word, maintenance. I screenshot the notification. I held my phone on the sofa for a long time. In the morning I was in the bathroom when I heard Warren in Rosie's room waking her for nursery, his voice low and even through the wall, and then Rosie's laugh at something he said. I stood at the sink with the tap running. She asked him what the word properly meant, and he said it meant you did something the right way, all the way to the end, and she said, oh, and they moved on with the morning. I turned the tap off and stood in the quiet with water still on my hands. On the Thursday morning, I badged into the Greyfield Tower at 8:52, my work bag on one shoulder and my phone in my hand. The lobby was in its usual morning rhythm, badges tapping, the chirp of the entry gates, heels on marble, the 2 ficus trees flanking the security station. A man in a plain mid-grey jacket stepped into my path at the near side corner of the desk and asked for me by my full name. I confirmed it automatically, the way I have always confirmed my name, without hesitation. He placed a sealed envelope and a stapled document set on the security desk counter beside me and stated his purpose. A petition for divorce with temporary financial and property protection orders, registered with the family court, 14-day response window, first hearing date in the cover letter. A solicitor's contact letter beside the envelope. He stepped back. The security guard looked at her screen. 2 marketing colleagues came through the revolving doors behind me and pulled up when they saw me standing still. They said good morning. I said good morning. I picked up the documents. I badged in. In the lift alone, I opened the appendix. Evidence listed. The Instagram party clip. Timestamped. Nadia's 47-second wide-angle file, provided by a named witness. The Saturday 8:47 morning message with the forwarded chain attached. A log of 16 declined calls. The bank transfer record. And a note about 2 witnesses who came through the stairwell side fire door at 9:38 the night of the party and heard me say, while the bass moved through the wall behind me, that the kiss was not about my husband. I had not seen them. I had not looked. The lift opened. At noon, I messaged Warren to ask if he could meet in the lobby cafe for 15 minutes. He replied at 12:11. He said he was not available and that everything would come through the solicitor's office, and he encouraged me to speak to my own solicitor within the response window. In the final line, he said he hoped Rosie and I had a good week. I read it 3 times. It was not cruel. It was complete. Here is what I understood. I had walked into that Fenchurch suite believing that the woman who accepts a dare in front of a crowd controls the room. Every act of that confidence was now page-numbered in an appendix. The kiss was page 2. The Saturday message calling it staged was page 4. The fire door speech heard by 2 people I had not seen was in a supporting note. A quiet man who asked the same questions several times without shouting had collected all of it and handed it to a process that did not need a performance. I thought being chosen in the crowd was power. What I had not understood was that the crowd was also taking notes. Closure snapshot. The joint account asset protection order meant my card was declined at a parking meter 2 days later, and I paid with my personal account, which ran short by the end of the week. The housing hearing was in 11 days, and the temporary arrangement was that I stayed at Petra's while the petition was active. She made tea and we sat on her sofa, and she did not say very much, which was its own kind of answer. The marketing inner group chat had 4 members now, my name simply gone with no announcement. Derek's check-in message on Monday was friendly and brief, and entirely without weight, and I did not reply, and he did not send another. Nadia and I exchanged professional sentences at adjacent desks every morning, which was the correct arrangement, and also the one that cost the most. Rosie came for a Sunday afternoon visit and said Auntie Joanna's house smelled like vegetables, and I laughed for the first time in 2 weeks, a real one. Warren collected her at 5, said 2 logistical sentences, and left without looking back at the door. The green dress was still in the wardrobe. I had not worn it again.